Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, dear authors and invited guests. Welcome to a technical session 6A on behalf of ICT IS 2021 and Global Knowledge Research Foundation. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to the fifth International Conference on Information and Communication Technology for Intelligent Systems. And we are thankful to everyone who present on this platform to go along with us digitally in this unpredictable circumstances of COVID-19 and making this conference more productive. Also, we wish we wish you and your families for their predicted time, and we all will pass through this together. We hope you will enjoy the knowledgeable and interactive sessions. Just before we get started, I would like to introduce our session chair, Anubha Jain. She is an associate professor and head of Department of Computer Science and IT in the IIS University. She has 20 years of teaching experience. Her research of interest in software engineering, algorithms and data structure, programming languages, information retrieval, information architecture, e-banking, and source transactions, web applications. I welcome you, ma'am, as a chair of this technical session 6A. Just before we get just before we get started, it's a special note for all the presenter. You will be given by 8 minutes for their presentation, and after 8 minutes, I will raise a gentle reminder for a conclusion. So, ma'am, it's all over to you. Now, I would like to invite our first presenter, Jaya Sudha, classification of medical image using deep learning of ed in adaptive big data crowdsourcing platform. Please just start the presentation.
Yes. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So good afternoon. I'll be presenting today on behalf of Jayasudha, as she's actually dealing with the medical emergency. So this is the paper. It's called Classification of Medical Images Using Deep Learning to Aid in Adaptive Big Data Crowdsourcing Platforms. Now, the crowdsourcing platforms are actually a very good source for different medical experts across the globe to come together and actually deal with several issues and actually give a particular diagnosis, because they'll be experts in their field. But one of the main issues is that the medical image databases that you actually get from these kinds of crowdsourcing platforms or even from general medical databases are assorted and they're unlabeled. So in order to solve this problem that there is no labeling on these medical images, we actually built a deep convolution neural network based system that is actually trained using different open access medical image repositories and OpenAI. Now, what we're particularly doing with this is that we're performing classification in order to aid the big data platforms. Our DCNN was actually employed to perform two crucial tasks in our work. First is interclass. That is, it's capable of effectively letting you know if a bunch of medical images are there, whether it's an MRI, ultrasound, or an X-ray. And particularly also intraclass. That is, within X-rays, it can also let you know whether it's a chest X-ray or an abdomen X-ray. So one of the fundamental motivation for us to take up this work was that over the past few years, neural networks have actually performed exceptionally on several landmark benchmark databases, such as ILS, VRC. And CNNs have even shown that they can actually halve the error rate, and they're also capable of even surpassing human performance. And since we know that the amount of data that's actually generated by healthcare providers is actually so large that usually these traditional methods cannot deal with them effectively, because usually big data and other things comes into picture. So the deep learning based methods actually are capable of effectively integrating, analyzing, and predicting from these kinds of heterogeneous big data sets. And some of the basic applications of deep learning currently in healthcare could range from medical diagnosis, drug discovery, clinical decision, health record analysis, and so on. Now, I'll try not to delve deep into DCNN because of time constraints, but typically what you need to know is that what a DCNN is, that it's an AI-based technique where you can actually train it with large substantial amounts of data, and it can actually perform image classification. Now, DCNN typically consists of a set of, let's say, convolution layer, pooling layer, fully connected layer, and so on. Now, As we all know, crowdsourcing in the medical field, this has actually grown phenomenally over the last few years. And the thing is that it actually can help all the researchers, doctors, and health experts, everybody to come together, and they can all have access to data that can be voluntarily uploaded. And experts in that particular field can actually give you effective diagnosis. Now, this process where a large group of people can actually come together to solve problem is actually becoming more mainstream these days. A couple of examples could be Apple's Research Kit, where it actually permits the users to use different interactive applications using deep learning to perform face recognition in order to have insights on particular diseases like Parkinson's and Asperger's. Similarly, IBM also in partnership with Medtronic actually has made large amounts of database and diabetes and insulin data actually databases available. Now, with the possibility and the prevalence of, let's say, high performance computing, networking infrastructure, online participation, which is much simpler these days, and new electronic devices such as smartwatches and smart bands, which can actually capture and transmit medical data. Crowdsourcing actually has a lot of potential these days in helping solve many of the crucial problems that actually exist in modern medical science. Now, this is a basic architecture of a crowdsourcing-centric medical big data platform. Now, what we're using here is a privacy-preserving architecture, which is actually based on the work of Jong-Hoon et al. We use specific techniques such as queue backlog, retrieval scheduling, and buffer management. Privacy preserving in the sense that we try to make sure that if a particular user has uploaded a bunch of images, we actually change it to a unique ID, and then that particular thing will be diagnosed, and if it does come back, then we will convert it from the unique ID onto the patient name so that the patient's privacy is preserved. Now, the exact elaboration of the architecture of this cloud-based container that we're doing, including everything like retrieval scheduling and buffer management and so on, we're actually deferring this to the next book because we actually built a separate paper for this, and that's actually pending publication currently in Web of Science. What we are doing in this particular work is that we're primarily focusing on two classification tasks, as I mentioned earlier. Interclass classification, we're given a bunch of medical images. We try to find out whether it's an MRI, ultrasound, or an X-ray. And interclass classification, within an X-ray, we try to find out whether it's an chest X-ray or an abdomen X-ray. So let me just give you a brief overview of the architecture of the DCNN. For a DCN architecture, we're actually using Google Inception to perform transfer learning. When instead of building the model from scratch, we're using something called Inception, where some amount of fundamental data is already available so that the model is a little bit sentient to begin with. So here with Google Inception's V1, V3, and V4, for V3 and V4, we're actually training the last layer with the open access medical image repositories, which are available for all of these images, MRI, chest X-ray, and ultrasound, and so on. And then we're adjusting the final layer so that we have these two pre-trained versions which are already available. Now, this particular classification pipeline that we're actually using was actually inspired by the works of Khosravi et al., as their CNN-based method showed a lot of promise in terms of differentiating and classifying different pathology images. Now, this is the basic framework of our method. First, we gather medical images from all these open access medical image repositories. Then we store them in a private cloud-based container. Third, we're employing a neural network that, as I mentioned previously, we're using transfer learning to pre-train it. And then we train the last layer with these medical images. And now finally, in step 4, we have a trained DCNN model that is capable of classifying these given medical images into interclass and intraclass. And finally, all these images, once they're classified and labeled, it would be much easier for us to just upload it onto different discussion threads of the crowdsourcing platform. And we do it in an anonymized manner where we don't give out the patient's name, we just use a unique ID. And so then, therefore, all the experts in the different fields can actually help provide accurate diagnosis. This is the overall framework of what I just explained. Now, this is our database design. Fundamentally, the issue is that in real world, medical images have a lot of issues, such as you can see, rotation, translation, horizontal flip, and shear, because not everything is digital, and some even during acquisition is not done effectively. Maybe the pose, the particular angle, the acquisition scenario itself could have issues. And since these exist in real world images, it can actually really affect classification accuracy. Hence, what we do is that during training, we're using a specific method called augmentation. Augmentation is a technique where we take a fundamental image, as I shown one example here. We can take the original image, and then we can create different forms of variations for this, like translation, rotation, horizontal flip, shear, and so on. So once we create these for a given image, we can create 15 to 20 different variations, and then we train our DCNN using all of these different variations. Even in the lack of significant amount of training databases, we can still make our method robust to these kinds of variations, which will exist in the real world image whenever we're trying to do any kind of classification for a real world database. And augmentation actually avoids the expense of needing like more training data set. Augmentation even makes the model more accurate and enhances generalization. We're using Keras here because actually it has shown good results in the work of Lakhani et al. Now, let me talk about the experimental results. Here I show you example results of, let's say, 2 sample images. For the first image, as we can see, image 101, The detected class, this is the interclass detection. We know that it is an X-ray. Then within the intraclass, within the X-ray, we also find out that it is a chest X-ray. Similarly, for the second image, for X-ray, we find out that the interclass is X-ray, and then again the intraclass is abdomen X-ray. And we've done that by using selected database setup where we use 100 images for chest X-rays, 100 database for abdomen X-rays. These are all test images. And similarly, we also use 200 images for the overall interclass comparison. Now, these are the two images that we spoke about, where we found out first that it's an X-ray, then that it's a chest X-ray, and similarly for that it's an abdomen X-ray in the second one. So in our results, it showed that out of the 96 images that we were using for chest X-ray, we were able to find out that out of 196 were chest X-rays, and again for abdomen, we were able to find out that 94 were chest X-rays, and the further boost in accuracy and efficiency could be given by training them further. Now, in this particular work, what we've done is that we've actually shown you a DCNN based method where we trained it completely using open access medical repositories. And these are all meant to help and gain more efficiency for the crowdsourcing platforms. And finally, this DCNN was able to do interclass classification, that is given a bunch of images. It's able to tell you it's an MRI, ultrasound, or an X-ray. It's also able to tell you within X-rays whether it's a chest X-ray or an abdomen X-ray. So for the future work, what we plan to do is that first is an effective privacy preserving cloud-based crowdsourcing platform. We've already done a review work on it, and the current work where it everything including the database scheduling, queue backlogging, buffer management, and overall server management actually has been put up, and that will be published in our next Web of Science work. And subsequently, we also want to come up with an agglomerative clustering method, where we need the problem with AI-based method is that you need a lot of training. You need thousands of images for them to work effectively. But in the cases where there are like very less images, we do need like a general traditional method that works. So in our next work, we're going to do a more statistical analysis where we'll compare each method like an MRI, like an ultrasound, and these X-rays. And we will try to compare them step by step with the clustering method in terms of each particular kind of noise. If these are digital images, if these are scanned images, and if rotation exists and what exists, and how each method performs against each other in terms of accuracy and F1 score. And finally, we are also trying to perform classification using the same DCNN method on knee MRI images. And for this, we are using Sanford's MRI dataset that has a lot of about 1370 knee MRI exams obtained. So using that, we'll be able to make our system even effective with knee MRI images. And the same kind of comparison statistically will be done with agglomerative clustering methods. These are the references that we've used. And right. So any questions?
Yes, it was a very good presentation, in fact.
Okay, thank you.
Just general question that I'm asking.
Yes,
you. How will it help the society in doing this research?
It should, ma'am. Actually, these days, if you look at it, like smart bands and smartwatches, they're almost taking over, right? If you see the latest Apple Watch, for example, it even has fall detection, where you can find out if an elderly somebody has fallen, it will automatically call like the health authorities. So these days, the thing is, all of your health data is available online. Like if you go to a doctor, he can only check something and he can tell you what is happening at that instant. But let's say you have a smartwatch or a smart band, you can have data that rolls back to 2 years, 3 years. So based on you, the doctor can tell you when were you actually healthy and when were you not, rather than using some kind of an objective thing. It can be more subjective. So in these cases, these days, it's happening more and more that you can have someone who's a world expert in, let's say, knee issues, rather than going to a general orthopedic. So in these cases, when you do put it on a crowdsourcing platform, you can have everyone who's an expert actually give you an input on it. And when enough images are labeled, you'll actually know that what is an actual, let's say, a knee fracture image and what is the input image. So from the suspected, you can always say what's happening and what is not. And improving those techniques and making sure these are more effective, that the buffer management is good, and that they're more better labeled can definitely help the society. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Sure.
And now I would like to call our next presenter. Mohammed Hassan, review of NOMA with the spectrum using techniques. I think Mohammed Hassan is not there, so we can move forward. We can invite our next presenter. Kishore Kumar. comprehensive and imperial evaluation of classical annealing and simulative quantum annealing and approximation of global optima of discrete of optimization problems.
Hi, this is Kishore. Are you able to hear me, Richard?
Yes.
Yeah, let me share my screen.
Yeah, please.
Able to see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this is the paper, and the title is the comprehensive and empirical evaluation of classical annealing and the simulated annealing, quantum annealing. So the basically we are trying to solve the discrete optimization problems, which are very pervasive in all the technology we use. So the problem with the discrete optimization problems is, as the problem size grows, the time complexity increases, and we run into a lot of the computation expenses. So there are the classical algorithms what we use. They are very limited in terms of their efficacy. So there are other alternative algorithms which are inspired by physical and biological means, something like thermal annealing and quantum annealing. These are the actually physical techniques which has been studied in chemistry, material science, and other physical sciences. But they found, so the idea is to use them, use the principles, the core principles, and simulate them on a digital computer platform and see how effective they are in performing the discrete optimization. So the main objective of this paper is the literature shows that the recent literature, the numerical studies and the analytical studies, they could simulate the quantum behavior, and even there is a lot of speed up in terms of optimization. Is it really true? Because so most of the researchers, they stick to numerical studies and the analytical studies, but not empirical studies, because they take up a couple of optimization problems, real world optimization problems, and didn't study whether one algorithm is superior to other algorithm given these two techniques, like simulated the thermal annealing and the quantum annealing. So the simulated quantum annealing is nothing but the simulated version of quantum annealing, and the simulated annealing is a simulated version of thermal annealing. So before we get into what exactly those algorithms and what are those simulated versions, it's better to understand the physics behind that. So there are certain materials which are dilute magnetic materials in physics. These are called as spin classes, because so every material, if it is a magnetic material, there is a lattice inside that, and there are magnetic spins associated with each atom in the lattice, and these are oriented like our natural magnets, like North Pole, South Pole. This way they have a orientation configuration. So in the case of ferromagnetic solids, they are completely aligned in the same direction. But in the case of spin classes, they are very different. So the magnetic state of this material, the lattice structure and the lattice spin configurations are very random, and each lattice configuration, I mean each spin interacts with the other spin, and there is a lot of random interaction between these spins inside the material. So, but the beauty of these materials is they evolve, they interact with each other with the right external field, like it could be a thermal field, or it could be a magnetic field, external magnetic field. They evolve and they reach their spin configuration of the entire material to lowest energy state. So the idea, here comes the idea, like why can't we look at the material, and if we can bring down that material to lowest energy state, and if we can map the energy state to a combinational optimization problem, considering the best, whatever the solutions possible in the combination optimization problem case, we map them to energy levels of these materials, and looking at the lowest energy level of the material, we can pick up the best optimal solution for the given problem. So like the image, like we picturized in the images, it's very obvious that this is the ferromagnetic material. These are the spin classes. You can clearly see the random interactions between the spins. And to understand these spin classes, these are actually materials where the physicist has come up with some models called some models, but Ising is another physicist who proposed a model which is called as Ising model. In this, they consider each spin as a discrete variable, and the upspin, downspin, it could be like 1 or -1 or 0 or 1, but in this case it is +1 and -1. These spins are arranged in the lattice as I explained, and we assume random interactions between these spins. And for this model, so there are two researchers, Edwards and Anderson, proposed a model called Edwards-Anderson model. So to introduce these effects, Ising model for particularly for dilute magnetic alloys or spin classes. So this model cannot be solved by, I mean, it can be solved analytically using all the differential integrals equation stuff, but it could be very computationally expensive. So we resort to the Monte Carlo methods, which are sampling based probabilistic models. So explaining the Ising model, the continuation is the simulated annealing. So what is simulated annealing? So these are the two algorithms we are trying to compare here, right? Simulated annealing is nothing but it's a simulated version of thermal annealing. It tries to find an optimal solution in the finite time. So it uses the thermal fluctuations to move across the configuration space. Like the particle is in here, and based on the temperature, the external temperature, it moves on and try to find the lowest configuration, I mean the lowest energy configuration, which is equivalent to the best solution in the solution space. And this is the Hamiltonian of the system. Hamiltonian is basically, in terms of physics, it explains the both kinetic and potential energy of the system is in complex system. But in this case, it's like the spins and the coupling between these spins. And the next thing is, the important part is the annealing part. How we choose the annealing. The Stewart and Donald are these two people, the researchers who proved a theorem which is to identify what is the best annealing schedule. So they come up with a relationship. Following this relationship, it gives the best annealing schedule, and it assures that the system goes to the lowest possible energy state. So for this simulated annealing, as we discussed, we are not going to use the analytical approach. We use the Monte Carlo methods. One we are using is Metropolis hashing algorithm. And so we pick up the samples and try to find the probability distribution. So you can, in the images given below, you can see this is the actual spin class. It's in the phase space. You can see clearly there is a completely random structure in here. As the annealing takes place, the domains forms, and finally the domains becomes larger and comes up to a phase where you see only.
Dear presenter, you have last 1 minute. Please conclude your presentation.
Sure. So then I'll move on to the quantum annealing. Like simulated annealing, this is about the quantum annealing. In this case, the Hamiltonian has another component, which is the quantum component. This quantum annealing works based on the quantum physics. It uses the particular principle called quantum tunneling, and it is run by the external magnetic field. So the quantum system is converted to a classical system, like a d-dimensional quantum system is converted to d+1 dimensional quantum system, and we apply the Monte Carlo technique, because Monte Carlo technique is suitable to apply for only classical systems, not the quantum system. So once we have this system, we solve using Monte Carlo. And these are the simulation results, and these are the settings we have used to for the temperature and number of iterations and the strength. So like, since we discussed about the empirical problems, we also selected a bunch of benchmark discrete optimization or combinatorial optimization problems. Like one is traveling salesman, vertex cover, graph coloring, max cut, job sequencing, binary linear integer programming, number factorization, prime factorization. So these are the benchmark problems we have selected, and we found there is as the analytical studies and the numerical studies shows the quantum annealing simulated quantum annealing has a edge over the classical annealing or simulated annealing, which is not the case when we perform this applied both algorithms on these empirical problems. We found out that so the SQA has doesn't have much advantage over the simulated annealing because of the many reasons that what we thought the reasons could be. The lowest energy levels, maybe these energy levels are clustered at the bottom of the configuration space. Maybe both algorithms are looking at the same energy levels. That could be because of the clustering of the energy levels. And so the other researchers, Santaro hypothesized like classical annealing follows a narrow potential wells, and SQA prefers the mid-altitude plateaus. So this clearly explains that these two algorithms explore different sections of the phase space. That could be one other reason. And one more important thing is the same case with how the simulated annealing may not be better compared to the simulated quantum annealing, given so there are many ways or many implementations to quantum annealing. We can implement quantum annealing in many ways. Maybe probably the implementation we chose or the literature they discuss about the particular implementation, that may be not the right implementation which has the advantage over the classical annealing. These are our observations when we perform the experimentation. Yeah, because there are other many reasons we have to optimize that rotor slices, which is the theoretical component, and the initial temperature and the annealing schedule, the field values. All these things could be affecting the optimization thing. There should be we are working on these things and try to understand much deeper into the subject. I end the presentation here. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Hello.
Sir, can you just go in your presentation a little back? Just the conclusion. I just want to go to the conclusion.
Sure.
Next slide. Say last slide.
Okay.
So, sir, as you have said that quantum optimization algorithms are not always better.
Yeah.
So, can you please tell me the reasons for that?
Because the whole point of the paper is, say most of the studies they focused on the either numerical studies or deducting the efficiency in terms of the mathematical equations. It's very analytical, but there is no much literature where they selected real optimization problems in real world optimization problems and use these algorithms one version or other. Because like I said, the quantum optimization algorithm can be implemented in many ways, like path integral Monte Carlo, like there are many other ways to implement the same quantum effects on a digital computer. So that is where in the entire literature they're saying, since there is a tag associated with that, the quantum associated with that. The quantum optimization algorithms are way superior to the classical algorithms based on those numerical and analytical studies. But which is not the case. When we tested these algorithms, standard versions on the real world problems, you can clearly see here the energy levels which CA or simulator annealing is achieving are way below. I mean, in this case, it is not way below, but they are still lower than the SQO. So the lowest energy level comprises, I mean, the corresponds to the best optimization solution in the solution space of the problem. So that is the reason we are saying not always the quantum optimization algorithms are not always better. Sometimes even classical ones works better. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And now I would like to invite our next presenter, Sandhya Devi, Enhancing Signal in a Noisy Environment, a Review.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, everyone. Today I'm going to present a paper on enhancing signal noise.
Dear presenter, your background noise. Yes, please go ahead.
Yes, ma'am. Now is it audible, ma'am? Hello. Hello, ma'am.
Yes, it's audible. Please continue.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Now I'm going to present a paper on enhancing signal in noisy environment, a review in ICTAS 2021 conference. I am G. Nagasandhya Devi from working as faculty in Gudlavaleru Engineering College, Gudlavaleru, Andhra Pradesh. And I have done this paper under the guidance of Vinay Kumar Mittal sir, KL University, Vijayawada. This paper contains the contents of this paper are abstract and multimodal signals, types of noises in different domains, performance of the signal processing methods in speech, and what are the signal processing methods used in other domains, and the results, applications, conclusions, and references. As we know that noise is present in all environments, in speech, in signal processing domain also, such as speech processing, image, and biomedical, there will be presence of noise. So in order to eliminate this noise, some of the noise reduction techniques or filters must be employed. This is a review paper which presents the elimination of noise in the images, speech and mobile audio signals, mainly reduces the signal obtained accordingly. Multimodality. Coming to the multimodality, multimodal means it refers to interaction between human to human communication or human to computer communication. Here we different domain signals will be combined, and that will be presented. That will be meant for interacting with the computer, from human to computer or human to human. The multimodal signals are multimodal signals in speech processing, image, and biomedical. Here we have considered these three types in signal processing. Multimodality in the image processing pertains to multiple characteristics in the image, whereas in speech processing, we convey our feelings by our expressions also. So here multimodality refers to our expressions as well as what we interpret and what we understand. In biomedical, there are many signals such as ECG, EEG, and so on. In that, the computed tomography, these techniques are multimodal in nature. Now present MRI techniques, these all are multimodal in nature. Here I have discussed different types of noises in the 3 domains. The noises present in images are Gaussian, Poisson, salt and pepper noise, quantization, periodic, etc. Uh, in speech, but coming to the speech, the noises in speech exists. Environmental noise may exist in between. Gaussian, Poisson, white noise, pink noise are also present. Next, different types of noise in biomedical signals include. We are going to one easy signal. So I've considered the noises as electromyogram noise, white Gaussian noise, power line interference, baseline monitoring. These all are present in ECG signal. So we need to remove these. Um, Here I have given the performance of different signal processing methods used in different studies in speech domain. Individual algorithms such as MMSE, these all log MMSE, these are proved to be good uh, proved to be good, but fusion algorithms, that is combination of RLS algorithm, recursive least square, they have proved to be better than these individual algorithms. The features such as melt frequency substral coefficients MFCCs and gamma tone frequency substral coefficients GFCC are extracted, and accordingly the noise can be reduced in the speech. These can be used in NLP application also. This is regarding features, and some of the filters they have used in some previous studies or LMS filter and spectral enhancement and temporal enhancement. Eigenspace normalization method, these have achieved error rate reduction up to 16%. Classifiers such as SVM and DNN, deep neural networks, have achieved up to 87% performance. Now coming to signal processing methods used in different studies, this slide consists of all the signals. Speech signal, as I have specified, a recursive least squares algorithm, that is a fusion algorithm. It has given better performance to the individual than the individual algorithms. Next, the image in the mobile audio signal, they have used in the previous study, they have used minimum variance distortionless response filter, MVDR filter, that has given a better performance. In image, different filtering techniques can be used to remove the noises such as salt and pepper noise, Poisson noise, etc. These are the filters they have used, and accordingly the PSNR and MSE, PSNR peak signal to noise ratio and MSE mean square error are calculated. If the PSNR is high for a given image and MSE is low for a given image after filtering, then it is said to be good image. Next, in the biomedical, the filters like Wiener filter, median filter with deep learning techniques have been used. The performance also have listed here in the terms of percentage. This one, recursive least square method have achieved noise is reduced to a great extent when compared with individual algorithms. Gamma GFCC and MFCC extraction, in that features with GFCC have proved to be better when compared to MFCC. Next, this spectral enhancement and temporal enhancement have given 55.7% result. In image, this Gaussian mixture model, this HOS method has been proved to be better when an image is captured in rain or snow. In order to clear that image, these methods have to be better. Fuzzy set filter and these adaptive median filters, these all are meant for salt and pepper noises, Gaussian noise, etc. Depending upon PSNR and MSE, we need to calculate, and we can compare with the other filters used previously, and we can say which is better. Next, biomedical signal, Wiener filter, median filter have been used. Median filter is proved to be better. Applications, coming to the applications, speech signal, today education has become digital. So this we are conducting online classes and all. So the speech signal should be enhanced without any noise, so that other one can listen and understand it clearly. So it will be helpful in education, conferences, political meetings, college functions, etc. Coming to the mobile audio signal in bus stations, we and in heavy traffic conditions, we face
Dear
a lot of
presenter,
disturbance.
you have
Yes, ma'am.
last 1 minute. Please conclude.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So this will help a lot in enhancing mobile audio signal. And coming to the image, this image also, in order to get clear image, enhancing it is very important. Coming to the conclusion, depending upon these methods, by varying some of the parameters, we can get accurate signal in the end. So we need to work on each domain, and we need to calculate the results accordingly, so that we can get a correct, accurate speech signal or image or biomedical signal. Thank you. These are the references. Thank you.
Okay, Sandhya. On a lighter
Thank you, ma'am.
note, I
Yes, ma'am.
would like to ask you, can you categorize the noise that was coming during your presentation? Which category will it fall into?
This may be under environmental noise, ma'am.
It will just be called environmental noise.
Yes, ma'am. Due to surroundings, it is coming. So I think it is environmental noise.
Okay, then it is fine. So now, can you just quickly go on your conclusion slide? Yeah, can you just put some light on this?
Ma'am,
You did, but can you just tell me the role of MVDR filter in achieving high performance?
yes, ma'am. It can to microphone we will connect, ma'am, so that this filter will delete the noise, ma'am. There, when we hear with headphones and all, we can get a clear signal, ma'am. This with this VDR filter.
Okay, and in the last you've written by using some more techniques on enhancing an existing techniques. So have you decided upon which techniques are you going to enhance?
Yes, ma'am, currently I am working in speech domain, ma'am, first. So we are working with zero crossing rate and energy we are calculating, and accordingly we are setting a threshold, and we need to clear the signal which is below that threshold, ma'am. That work we are doing, ma'am, for now.
Okay, okay, that's it. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandhya, for a great presentation.
Thank you, ma'am.
And now I would like to invite our next presenter, Man Singh, a study of mathematical backgrounds behind the digital communicative switches design.
Myself Mansingh. My paper ID is 221 and my paper name is a study of mathematical background behind the digitally communicative switches design, and PhD research scholar in Department of Mathematics, Delhi Technical University. These are the outlines, the abstract, the touch screen dialing, and the modulation, demodulation of the dial tone, and metric representation of switches, and conclusion, and last is references. The dial tone frequency demodulation and modulation process for the micro controller sound card and a suitable coded program is a conventional technical telecommunication techniques used in the telecommunication system. So dial tone frequency demodulation modulation tasks are come from obtained from the Fourier transformation of sine and cosine sequence functions. The paper is considered mathematical algorithm are applied to encode and decode the matrix elements such as positions, row and column, sampling frequency to form the finite Fourier sine and cosine transformation with the help of the MATLAB programs. Touch screen dialing. When we talk the telecommunication technological development of the telephone set, the rotatory dial was used in the initial stage. The slower dialing was the one major disadvantage associated with the rotary dial. It took 12 seconds to dial a 7-digit number of the rotary dial. The step-by-step switching element of the Stover switching system cannot be respond to the rate higher than the 10 to 12 pulse per second. So it is used to be TM technology prior to which the pulse dialing technical was used. In the pulse dialing technical, which is also called the loop disconnected technical, repeated connected and disconnected of the lines is done. The clicks of the switch is interpreted by the exchange as a dial tone according to the number of clicks, which is the introduction of the common control subsystem. In the switching exchange, there came to the feasibility of the higher rate of the dialing. Hence, the new system is called the touch tone dialing was developed in a telephony to replace the rotatory dial. This was considered to the benefit of the customer with the higher speed. This is also remove the disadvantage of the limited usage and the limited signaling capacity along with a lower speed. Touch tone dial is a transform in the synthetic of the dual tone multi-frequency system, TM3. Modulation or demodulation of the dial tone. The dial tone time frequency modulation is the process of the encoding information into the transmitted signals form. The demodulation is the process of the extracting information from the encrypted transmittance signals. A modem is at far the demodulate the audio signals to the recover the data stream from the encoded decoding signals. The metric representation of the switches. The press button telephone dialing pad act like a 4x3 or 4x4 metric associated with the alphanumerical switches, and each switch position has a row and column frequency alert mode. In this case, if I take the case is a 4x3 matrix, so there is 12 press buttons switches in the telephone dialing pads. Where the switch matrix, the row frequency is F row is the row frequency that is given by 800, 830, 982, and 1071, and the column frequencies are given by name renamed by F column 1339, 1466, and 1607. The level of each switch press buttons R can be, because there are 4x3 matrix, there are switch 12 press buttons, so we rename by this press buttons by 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, and remaining 3 buttons are labeled by 0, star, and hash. The label position corresponding to the row index and the column index can be denoted by the format 6. 6 is the Klein-Moller box. So switch level 0 has the row index 4 and column index J is 1. Switch level star can be denoted by row index is 4, that is 4-1 position, that is another is 4-2, and switch level hash, that is 4-3. So otherwise, if D the digit within 1 to 9, the column index is obtained by J is equal to modulo of D minus 1 comma 3 plus 1, and row index is related to the rule D K is equal to K is 4 rows, G minus J divided by 3 plus 1. So in case of 12, in case of 16 switch buttons, so the F row frequency are given this, and column frequencies are 1339, 1466, 1607, and 1763. So there are 16 level switches buttons, and that can be labeled by 1 to 9 is 9 button is there, A, B, C, D, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 13, 14. and this is 13, and 0 is 14 position, star is 15 position, hash is 16 position, where the levels of ABCD are position level are 10, 11, 12, 13. In general, if S is the character, that level one of the buttons on the keypad that corresponds to the row index with the column index can be found by this. So in case of such level is case 0, star and hash. So this is row is 4 and column is 2. Row in case of star, row is 4, column is 3, and in case of hash, row is 4, its column is 4. Otherwise, other element is denoted by D is equal to S minus 0, J is modulo D minus 1 comma 4 plus 1, and K is row is obtained from this rule, D minus J divided by 4 plus 1. This is the end. So this is the MATLAB code for finite Fourier sine transform. For press button 1, switch 1, because I take the system is 4 cross 4 matrix, so there are 16 switch buttons. So if I press switch 1 button, so this is the coding for switch 1 for sine spectra. So this is MATLAB programming. This is clear, and this row frequency are given. This is the column frequency. S is the character, that is menu. There is given input, and all the switch labels are given. K is represented row and J is represented column. So all three cases are given. 0 is represented for 2 position, star is represented for 3 position, and hash is represent 4 comma 4 position. So all 16 position are labeled position by this rule, and otherwise all other element D is equal to S minus 0, J is equal to modulo D minus 1 comma 4 plus 1, and K is, row is given by D minus J divided by 4 plus 1, and the total frequency Fs is taken is 32,898. The time period is given by 0 to 1 upon my Fs and to 0.015. So this is the interval, sub interval are given, and y1 is a sine graph. So sine is 2 pi row frequency into t time, and y2 is the sine 2 pi into column frequency, and total is y is nothing, is some average of all two. Plot time T by R, color is red, X level is time, Y level is frequency, and title is sine spectra for switch 1. So this is the output. Switch 1, S is 1, D is 1, J is equal to 1, K is equal to 1. Total frequency is this. This is the keypad, which is all the 16 symbols are given in keypad. So if I press 1, then output is coming this. Like this is the graph of sine spectra for switch 1 ke liye, the time versus frequency. Similarly, the MATLAB coding for the cosine transform for switch 1. So these are the, this is the coding for cosine spectra. This is the.
Dear presenter, could you please?
Hello. Hello. Hello, ma'am.
Mansingh ji, please wind up your presentation. Time is about to be over.
Okay, ma'am. This is the conclusion. So in our in programming, there is our cases there are 16 switch buttons. So each if I press each button, there is a sine spectra graph according to and cosine spectra graphs. So for that we find the control points, and we in conclude we also find the interpreting for using the control points we interpolate the graph of that sine spectra curve. These are the conclusions. This is the conclusion. These are the references. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you please move to your previous slides? So what is the future work that you intend to do in this field?
मैम मैंने जो 4x4 की मैट्रिक्स ली है, तो there are 16 press buttons. The keypad is given 16. So for each button we got a graph of sine spectra and also sine spectra graph. So उसमें से जो मैक्सिमम और मिनिमम पॉइंट होगा, उन पॉइंटों को कंट्रोल पॉइंट्स होते हैं, तो उन कंट्रोल पॉइंट्स का मैं यूज करके और उन कंट्रोल जितने भी कंट्रोल पॉइंट्स आएंगे फॉर डिफरेंट डिफरेंट स्विचेस के लिए, वहां से मैं उनको इंटरप्रेट कर सकता हूँ, उनका ग्राफ इंटरप्रेट करके और उनकी एरर को मिनिमाइज कर सकता हूँ. दीज आर द दिस इज the feature work, the determination of the control points. Those are obtained from in the sine and cosine transform spectral lines, fitting the interpolating the B splines. This is quadratic spline and Bezier. Especially, I use the Bezier curve to obtain the best fit of the lines that perform effective pulse code modulation. Each of the 16 switches frequency pulse modulation spectral lines curve fitting is to be discussed. So for each case, we have to fitting the interpolating, that is especially we use the control points and find the cosine and sine spectra lines.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now I would like to call our next presenter, Rashmi Dixit.
Yeah, good afternoon, ma'am. Am I
Uh,
audible?
Yes, Rashmi Dixit.
Yeah, can
Please
I
start.
Yeah. So hope, is it visible?
Yes, Rashmi.
Yeah. Okay. So good afternoon, one and all. Myself, Rashmi Dixit, along with co-author Dr. Yadgi and Dr. Nirgude. Here I am presenting promote an abstract understanding of the problem-solving knowledge in the theory of computation through visualization-based intelligent tutor system. So this is a general guideline or outline, whatever I am discussing here with introduction, the challenges, literature review, that is visualization-based intelligent tutor system, the JFLAP tool, implementation, results, and last but not least, the conclusion. So start with my presentation, introduction. So just like heart is to body, so is the theory of computation for computer science and engineering discipline. It is used in designing course deals with designing of abstract machine like finite automata, push-down automata, Turing machine. It is not only involves designing but also theoretical concepts like theorems, proofs, and examples, and to deal with examples accordingly. So these are the challenges while studying or while teaching the TOC. The course TOC is also focuses on formal language and automata theory, and students cannot easily visualize theoretical constructs by traditional teaching. In traditional teaching, problem solving is done by pencil and paper method, where the student do not understand actual concept without visualization. They cannot easily evaluate their solved problems to determine if the solutions are correct. Hence, they depend on others for the solutions, especially on the teacher. Now, look at here. This is our general classroom scenario. So, blackboard method, teaching method. Teacher draw model on the blackboard. Students also in their notebook, and the teacher analyze model working by taking different examples, and students also try to understand simultaneously with the teacher. Like all fingers are not same, students of the same classroom are also of different essence, different mental ability, different flavor. When teacher drawing, designing model on the boards, some students actively participate in analyzing and drawing. Some are just copying with gossiping with bench partners, and some are even not bothered about what is happening in the classroom. Negligence may bring losing interest in designing different models which are linked with each other. This course contains more mathematics and also require discrete mathematical concepts as a prerequisite. So the weaker students need to work on more examples and problem solving to acquire subject knowledge. The automata theory uses more mathematical notations to represent languages and theorems. Now these are the sample notebook copies are attached here with. One is for active student to write down active or somewhat you can say that good or a bright student who write down each and everything carefully and neatly. And this is a notebook snapshot of a passive student, or in other words, you can say as a not interested while discussing with some friend. So these are the two sample copies are attached here with. The next part is literature review. Different tools or different techniques are already available like Mathematica, Computatorica, Fire Engine, Grail, SoftLab, and JFlab. And we are focusing on a JFlab. So now comes into the picture the intelligent tutor model. Now, what is intelligent tutor system? Intelligent tutor system is a computer system based on artificial intelligence designed to draw a content. The main goal of intelligent tutor system is to interact with students similar to a human tutor. The program personalizes the feedback based on the background and the progress of every individual student. It consists of 4 basic parts like here. The domain model. The domain model with expert knowledge. The student model examines students' level of understanding. The tutoring model gives assignment, and the user interface mode for communication. Now the next part is visualization based intelligent tutor model, JFlab, that is Java formal languages and Automata packages. So JFlab intelligent tutor is a free open source tool, can be used while teaching formal languages and Automata theory. It not only provides interface for designing various machines like finite automata, pushdown automata, and Turing machine, but also gives stepwise processing of machine.
Please conclude your presentation.
Hello, sorry.
Hello. Please conclude your presentation. You have last 1 minute.
Okay. So JFlab, the experiment is conducted for SY BTech, which has 3 hours of a lecture and 1 hour of a tutorial. So experiment is conducted during 1 hour of a tutorial session. The batch 1 and 2 will act as a control group, and students of batch 3 and 4 will act as an experiment group. Now these are the different screenshots of a JFlab, which is act as a visualization based intelligent tutor. Now you can say from the results that the students of the control group and experiment group, there is an increase in a percentage of marks of experiment group as compared to the control group. Now remember one thing, the bright students, no matter whether in a control group or experiment group, always perform the good, but there is an increase in a mark range from 11 to 15 to 16 to 20. So as our brains are tailored to attract towards the images by birth only to improve learning ability of a student, visualization is the master key. Additional to the visualization, tutor support is like a bonus. Intelligent tutor is available for providing feedback at any time to students. The conclusion after experiment is that the interest but also improve in designing of a different machine like finite automata, pushdown automata, and Turing machine. So thank you.
Thank you, Rashmi.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, Rashmi. Rashmi,
Yeah,
can you just move to the previous slide?
which one?
Yes, just previous one. Okay. So you have used just JFLAP2, right?
JFlab.
So have you designed it, or it's a...
No, it is an open source software available which we can download easily.
Okay.
Students also can download easily.
Okay. And what are your now future goals in this research? What are you planning to do next?
Actually, it is an instructional strategy used to make a class active. And now as during the COVID pandemic situation, it is really useful for a student to use it on a broader scale because teachers are not there. They are online, by the way.
So have you implemented it? Are people using it?
Yeah, actually the JFlab is used for TOC and also the subject compiler construction, which is in the TY. these students also make use of JFlag. It is means you can see here whatever students are drawing, they can draw here, they can check whether their results are correct or not simultaneously. Different modes are available for the JFlag.
Again, this is something which is inbuilt in the tool, right?
Yeah.
What did you exactly do in the tool?
Actually, we are using it for SY for the subject of TOC. Instead of means classroom scenario, I explained previously, कुछ बच्चे निकालते हैं, कुछ बच्चे नहीं निकालते, लेकिन एग्जाम के वक्त हमने जो निकाला है वो सही है या गलत है ये भी उनको पता नहीं चलता. तो विद द हेल्प ऑफ JFlag, दैट इज अ विजुअलाइजेशन, मतलब वो देख सकते हैं क्या क्या हो रहा है, कैसे हो रहा है यहाँ पे, तो उनको वो कैसे हो रहा है इसका इमेजिनेशन भी आता है और वो सही है कि गलत है ये भी पता चलता है.
So how much fruitful it is being for you in teaching the students?
110%, madam, because rightly as we have conducted online classes for TOC also, I can draw it, but I don't know whether the students are drawing along with me or not. अगर एग्जाम के वक्त उनको करना भी है तो विद द हेल्प ऑफ JFlag वो कर सकते हैं, चेक कर सकते हैं कि हमने जो निकाला है वो सही है या गलत है. ये प्रोसेसिंग कैसे होता है वो इमेजिनेशन पूरा वो मतलब वर्चुअलाइज कर सकते हैं क्या चल रहा है.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a good tool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to call Sujata CN, discrete velvet transform based non-blind video authentication using principal component analysis.
Yeah,
Sujata.
good afternoon all. Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, I'll share my PPT.
Please present your paper in English language
One
only.
second. Okay. Yeah, is it visible, my presentation?
Yes, please present your paper in English language.
Yeah. So I'm Sujata from Srinidhi Institute of Science and Technology from Hyderabad. Today I'm going to present video authentication using DWT and principal component analysis. For this authentication, we are going to use digital watermarking technology. That is a hybrid digital watermarking scheme based on DWT and principal component analysis we are proposing here. The popularity of this digital-based application is combined by the need of authentication and copyright protection to prevent illegal copying and distribution of digital video. So in this presentation, I'm going to cover introduction, research objectives, and applications, proposed algorithm, experiment results, and conclusion. So first, what is a digital watermarking? It's a common term today in nowadays we are using to protect the multimedia content. We are going to use some hidden information. We are going to implant into the image or video. Here, I'm going to explain about the video. Here, different types of watermarking are existing. That is visible and invisible. Coming to the visible watermarking, it is associated with the perception of the human eye to identify where the secret information has been embedded in the image. But coming to this visual watermark, I'm directly going to the slide because different types of watermarks: visible, invisible, blind, and non-blind, robust, and fuzzy. In this proposal, I'm going to prefer invisible, non-blind, robust. That I'm going to present in the coming slide. So now we understood why we want this digital watermarking, because to transfer the multimedia documents across the internet, it is very important nowadays. So authentication and copyright protection of multimedia content is very, very crucial nowadays. So security through obscurity, that means we are going to avoid observation by intended unimportant recipients. So to prove the ownership, the authenticated information is going to be placed in the image or video multimedia content. So with this implantation, we can identify a misappropriate person if illegally something was happened, something is distributed over the internet. That is possible using this watermarking technology. So coming to this visible watermarking, something. So if you look at this one, this is an image. Something was overlaid on this one. It shows that one right of that primary image. So it avoids attackers to do some modifications on this image. That is the advantage of visible watermarking, because it discourages the attackers to attack the image by looking at this logo or seal of that particular organization or MNC, whatever it is. So, but the disadvantage is when you superimpose something on this image, some degradation of the visual quality will take place. That is the disadvantage of the visible watermarking. So next, this is application dependent. So anyway, coming to the invisible watermarking. So here, so your just image will be displayed, something will be hidden inside the image in the invisible watermarking, that is imperceptible to the invisible to the human eye. Disadvantage is it is vulnerable to attacks, because attackers will identify, we cannot identify that the particular image is hidden with some secret information. So that what they will do, they will cut and paste some images on the original image. They will take the ownership of that image. In such cases, we can identify, that means we can authorize that image, that means we can prove that that was authorized by us by extracting whatever is inserted already in the original image. That is the advantage of this invisible watermarking. So to preserve the ownership or authentication, most people will go for invisible watermarking. And sometimes they may use this tampering also. They will try to change the meaning of the image. In such cases also, internally hidden watermark or secret information will track that changes. So that is the importance of invisible watermarking. So next, coming to the blind and non-blind. So why this actually, this classification comes at the time of extraction. How we are initially we kept something in the original image. At the time of extraction, how we are going to extract that information, whether by using the original information or without using the original information. So if you are not using original information to track, that means to crack the hidden information, then it falls under the blind watermarking. Suppose if you use the original information to extract that hidden data, then it falls under non-blind. So with here in this case we are going to use the non-blind, because we are going to use original video to extract the hidden information. Next, another classification is fragile and robust. So means, as I said, just now we discussed about the tampering of the image. Any small modification if someone will do for our image, that will reflect on the degradation of the visual quality, or it will delete the internally hidden information. That means it is very sensitive to the small modifications. That is nothing but the fragile watermarking. Robust watermarking, it can withstand even if you do some modifications on the watermarked video or image, it can withstand that one. So that means even after certain attacks, we are able to extract the information without any without losing any information. So next, before going to that one, the two important steps in the watermarking.
Dear presenter,
yes,
you have last 1 minute.
Okay, sir. Location selection and processing. In this case, location selection has been done using the DWG, and then where to embed this one, that will be done by using principal component analysis. So what is the processing you are taking? So directly I'm going to my actual work. This is the DWT. So for example, if you take the Lena image, if you apply that DWT, first I'll apply one time, that means DWT on the rows, and then apply on the column. We all know image is a two-dimensional signal. So if you apply that one, the signal will look like this: low frequency components and high frequency components. If you look at this, maximum content is available in the low frequencies. Again, I apply on low frequency, low pass filter and high pass filter and low frequency components. Similarly on the high frequency components. Finally, I'm going to get 4 subbands. That is advantage of discrete wavelet transform. It is going to display this image in 4 resolutions: LL, LHL, LH, and HH. Here we'll got low frequency component, horizontal frequency components, vertical frequency components, and diagonal frequency components. So over that, we are applying the PCA, principal component analysis. It is mainly used for dimensionality reduction. It converts the more correlated data into uncorrelated data, which is called as a principal components. So those are the more important components which we cannot disturb. So those components we will retain, we will give least priority to the remaining components. That means redundant information. So next, here we are going to find out the imperceptibility, capacity, and robustness. Imperceptibility means how much visibility is being distorted after embedding the data, and capacity means how many bits you are going to embed in the original data. Robustness means even after attacking the image, I'm adding some noise to the image or video. After that, how much content you are going to retrieve, that represents this. This is the flowchart for the our algorithm. So original, here I'm applying on the video. Video will be converted into frames that I'm dividing into number of frames. Each frame is a color video. RGB space is converted into now I'm applying color space here. So color space conversion is YUV map. So I'm applying this methodology on only Y component without disturbing the coherence component U and V. So on Y component, I'm applying readability, discrete wavelet transform. As I said earlier, I'm going to get 4 subbands, but I have chosen only one subband, that is LH band. And then I'm applying block-based PCA, principal component analysis. That means again, this LH band is divided into blocks. On that blocks, I'm applying PCA. That means I'm dividing this into, again, further I'm classifying into correlated and uncorrelated. I'm taking uncorrelated data.
Presenter?
Yes, 1 minute.
Go with the conclusions, right? Please.
Yes. This uncorrelated data gets added with the watermark at a scaling factor. That scaling factor will be chosen on trial and error basis on different trials. After different trials, I'm choosing that scaling factor. And then finally, I'm going to apply the inverse principal component analysis to get the modified LH components. So, and then already it is divided into 4 subbands. And again, those 4 subbands are going to combine by applying inverse readability to get the watermark video frame. While combining all the video frames, we're going to get video. Similarly, to extract that one, same process I'll apply, like the DWT, I'm applying DWT, block-based PPC. But the thing is, it is non-blind. Again, I'm using the original video, watermarked video as well as original video, and then by subtracting these things at a chosen scaling factor, whatever scaling factor we have chosen, we're going to get this extracted watermark. So these are the steps, whatever we have seen. So these are the results we obtained. This is the video of 150 frames we have taken. Each of size, if you look at this, when everything is displayed here, 250, each frame of size 256 by 256, and 150 frames are there in this video. And this is the QR code we have taken to embed this into this video. This is the binary form. So then the watermarked video frame. Again, there is no change in the frames and the size of the video.
Please finish it off.
Yeah. So this after
Just
embedding, I have
conclusion. You can just
Gaussian noise. We have tested this one against various attacks. Gaussian noise, salt and pepper noise, for filtering, rotation, frame averaging, and something. So even after attacking, we are able to get whatever hidden in the video. So this is a non-blind video authentication algorithm. So shows acceptable robustness and imperceptibility. It is a similarity factor. It is big signal to noise ratio. Even after attacking, we are able to preserve this QR code. And this authentication again can be extended to color image embedding. Instead of QR code, we can extend this.
I have a question.
Yes.
This algorithm has been tested on or applied to how many images?
Actually, I have applied for binary images only, madam. Almost 15 to 20 images I have tested, madam.
Okay. 15 to 20. Are you planning to implement it on more, or that much number is sufficient?
Actually, we are planning to extend it by dividing this video into scenes, madam. In this algorithm, we have chosen individual frames. And then we are using block-based PCA. Instead of that one, first video will be divided into different types of scenes. In each scene, so we can embed different types of watermarks in such a way that we can increase the capacity of that algorithm.
Okay.
In that sense, we can go for the 3-channel watermark also.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Now I call next presenter. So Mohammed Hassan, review of NOMA with spectrum sharing technique. Yes.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, everybody. You hear me and see my presentation?
Yeah, you are audible, sir. Please continue.
Okay, good afternoon. First of all, let me thank the community and organizations of international conference and praise the wonderful work that has been carried out in exceptional circumstances in terms of organized.
Please move ahead with your slides.
Okay. My title review of NOMA with the spectrum sharing technique. Problem statement where less generation leads an increase bandwidth and less latency, which has been achieved by developing and adding a new technologies and to detect channels. The problem is that development is restricted by the limited spectral band, and spectrum resource allocation policies have some limitation how to find advanced spectrum sharing and multi-axis technique. Objective to look for techniques and methods that utilize spectrum resources to survey spectrum efficiency improvement, to investigate the performance of combining cognitive radio with non-orthogonal multi-axis in 5G network. The methodology is a description methodology was used to analyze and the main function of the method using to improve the spectrum band, a logarithm method of NOMA and spectrum sharing, addressing method for challenges of and benefit effect on CR combining with NOMA in 5G. Introduction. We can divide the multi-axis technique in two categories: conventional or orthogonal multi-axis OMA, such as FDM and TDM, have good performance and protection from interference between users, but they have low spectrum efficiency and some waste frequency in order to protect user from interference. Non-orthogonal multi-axis scheme, the same frequency, time, or code is shared to the user, and the differentiated by the various power level in power domain NOMA, which makes the spectrum efficiency and channel capacity utilization well. However, there is a great interference between users. 5G mainly concerned with high data rate, low latency, low power user, increased system capacity, and most notable mass networking of device. This needed can be satisfied by using NOMA technique in 5G system. Basic concept of NOMA. They are two divide or two type or categories: NOMA power domain or NOMA code domain. Here we focus on for first type for downlink. In NOMA, the power is located according to the distance between base station and users, and we can see in this figure, this user is near base station. We get low power, and far from base station we get high power. The near power as a near user, we need successive interference cancellation because we receive all signal. After that, we can detection its user, its signal, but the far user can detection the user can detection the signal. And in uplink implementation of NOMA is strictly different of the downlink. In this time, base station employs successive interference cancellation in order to distinguish the user signals. The optimal detection order will first be to detect the code from the strong signal and switch it to the weak signal. Basic concept of cognitive radio. The first cognitive radio definition was given by Professor Metola. Cognitive radio was defined as intelligence communication techniques that knows the surrounding considerable and use method awareness by making it possible to impart form the atmosphere and adjust the internal case in sphere statistical different with the incoming radio frequency by making corresponding adjustment to the working parameter in real time. The main goal of this technology is to optimize spectrum utilization. The CR spectrum must distinguish the primary user and secondary user. There is a 4-step for cognitive radio. First is sensing. Second, sensing. Second is first. Okay, can jump. Here, this is the first step. It's sensing during intra and interfering interform data transmission sliding time. The spectrum sensing is performed. Frequency hopping multi-axis such as searching the communication protocol for discovery of the previous used challenge with transmission of the next channel is achieved. The following methods are widely used for spectrum sensing: spectrum energy sensing, coherent sensing, psychostationary sensing, and autocorrelation feeling. There is a lot of, in any method there is advantage and disadvantage. We can take energy sensing, for example. Energy sensing is very simple to implementation and easy, but the accuracy is not. The accuracy is very low. Sharing of spectrum, there is two types for sharing: cooperative sharing and also non-cooperative sharing. Also here, you can use cooperative in some application. We cannot use in other application because everywhere we have also there's an advantage and disadvantage. The access type of spectrum sharing is a CR keep. There's 3 types for that: interaway, underway, and overlay. Related where this the first author discuss about the 5G and NOMA, and will provide more efficiency by using spectrum sharing. The second one is propose full duplex. The third one is use full duplex regarding, and here also there's a problem for interference. The third one use synchronize and miss time, and this time we cannot use for big data.
Can you move to your experimentation slides?
Okay, the NOMA with CR spectrum sharing. The combination of NOMA and CR can make 5G standard successful. Cognitive construction of NOMA is very difficult problem in practice because there's NOMA and CR. There's interference problem in 2 techniques. Cognitive radio aims to better sharing spectrum in proactive way to increase spectrum utilization. The advantage of cognitive sharing of with NOMA, enhanced spectrum use, massive connectivity, low latency, and better adjustment. Conclusion and recommendation. NOMA technique makes spectrum efficiency and channel capacity utilization better than OMA. Cognitive rate technique is an effective method to solve the problem of spectrum scarcity and provide spectral efficiency benefit. To improve the spectrum sharing efficiency is done by combining NOMA and CR to meet 5G standard for high performance. Recommendation, the study that's where this spectrum could be used more efficiently by combining NOMA and CR techniques. This reference, thank you for this.
Okay, so this is a review.
Yes, review paper.
Are you further going to experiment about the same?
Now I work for spectrum efficiency enhancement using NOMA and cooperative spectrum sharing in 5G network. I work in this area. No.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Maybe we can move with the next presentation.
All presenters are done, madam.
Okay, sir.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hello, Ahmed sir. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you, ma'am?
I'm also good.
Jay, all the presentations completed?
Yes, sir. All presented.
Okay, so I would like to take this opportunity to thank, first of all, Dr. Anubha Jain, as well as all the participants who have contributed to this session and presented their work. I also understand that it takes a lot of efforts and time to present a paper. It's not only presenting a paper, right from starting submitting a paper to a conference and then to the presentation. It's almost 5 months time, 5 to 6 months. So I appreciate the efforts of all the participants. And thank you very much for that same. And we would, on the behalf of our organization, like to present a token of appreciation in form of a certificate to Dr. Anubha Jain. This is for you, ma'am. You will be receiving it shortly through mail.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I again congratulate you for organizing such good conferences always. And
we are doing our part, ma'am, and everyone, and hope that this pandemic will end soon so that we all can again have physical conferences.
Right, sir, right.
This is the only message to me, that to everyone, that we should meet soon, very soon, once this pandemic is over. Thank you very much. And I think for all the participants, you will also receive your certificates, your payment receipts, and your thanks letter in a couple of days after this conference is over. So please be patient that time. And all the papers have already moved to Springer, and we will be updating you as and when we are getting the replies from them. Thank you very much. And before, if there are presenters, we can just click a small snap. Although it will be digital, but if there are any presenters still in the session, please put on your camera so that we can just click on the present snaps. Jay, can you please take a few snaps?
Thanks, sir.
Thank you very much once again. And we are moving ahead towards the last technical session. So that will be started at 4:30 p.m. So I look forward to see you all again there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Anubha. Look forward to see you soon.
Yeah, same here, Ahmed sir. Take care. Have a good day.
Same to you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
We'll be closing this meeting in next 1 minute so that we can have the participants of the next session again on the same meeting link. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, sir.